Now, Prince Harry's hands are a bit of an enigma. I have his left and his right hands here, and I'm going to break down everything I can see here. I'm also going to point out what I think the wearing of this black ring on his right hand symbolizes unconsciously. The wearing of rings in palmistry is an often misunderstood and forgotten aspect of palmistry. Now then, Harry is a bit of an air hand. It's a square palm and long fingers. He likes a hot topic, a debate. He's a great talker. In fact, at first glance, these are the hands of a communicator. Air hands love a mystery. They love conversation. They love to travel, and they are intellectuals. They're great problem solvers. They love getting to they love understanding an issue and solving problems, getting to the root of the matter, and deep, meaningful conversations. What strikes me as quite unique about Harry's hands are the fact that his, in terms of, you notice how Apollo here is quite squared off, whereas the rest are sort of rounded to conic. Harry is creative in his practical endeavours. Notice it's a square palm, but there's quite a sort of rounded feature. Luna's very well developed. So there's a very sort of non-conformist approach to practical approach. The way he plans and goes about things is very unconventional. And in terms of his creative abilities, in terms of his creativity, he's very practical. So he's practical when it comes to his creativity, but he's creative when it comes to practical matters. He relies very strongly on his intuition, his unconscious quick reflexes, his gut and his emotion when it comes to the way he reacts and responds in the heat of the moment. And I say heat, actually, that's quite a fitting word. Notice how the fingertips are quite sort of red here. This is a person who is their thinking, their search for knowledge is very responsive, very quick. He's very active in the mental region of his. As I say, he's an intellectual. Notice how, although the headline does start quite high up on the hand, it seems to divide the palm and creates quite a large upper portion of the palm there. So the mental and the emotional capacity of this person is quite heightened, and the two are actually intertwined in some respects, because on the left hand we actually have here what looks like a simian line. But before I get into the lines, I just want to point out a few things here. So the kind of conic Mercury and Jupiter points towards someone who is a strong verbal communicator. This literally points towards a sharp-tongued, silver-tongued individual, gift of the gab. This is someone who is a strong persuader. Notice how Mercury leans in quite sharply at the tip as well. It's also quite long. This in conjunction with the sort of pointiness of it. Really, this is, as I say, it's as a hand of a communicator. This is someone who's very strong, diplomatic, persuasive, highly gifted when it comes to his verbal communication. And the pointed Jupiter also means that he's very able to break down information, explain, pass on, teach. So again, this is someone who is actually, a born sort of diplomat, a leader in that sort of sense, certainly. This is certainly someone who loves a good conversation, and as such, certainly requires a strong communicator in a partner as well. The base of Luna, Venus, and Neptune are all quite strong. The base of the palm here looks very well developed. It is square, but it's also got a very sort of rounded feature to it. And with that, he's able to utilize his charisma, really get his point across, and use this the bridge of Neptune here. When Neptune is developed well enough, when all three of these are well developed enough, it really allows our sense of character to carry our message across to the outside world and let our message be heard and understood. So when we measure the length of Mercury against the bottom two phalanges of Apollo, we can quite clearly see that it reaches further than the first tip of Apollo, and we can see that anyway from where it is, but this gives us a real indicator as to just how long the Mercury finger is, and with that, this is extra sort of evidence to suggest that this is someone who is a very strong communicator, a strong learner as well. This is someone who's very quick to think and feel, but someone who takes a very long time to process the information. The length of the fingers, the longer the fingers, the longer someone takes to process and analyze information. And that really means that, someone like this, when they are hurt deeply. The scars take a long time to heal, particularly people with a simian line. Now this is on the left hand here, and what this really demonstrates is that the difficulties that this line causes will be more in the domestic sphere, but the opportunities, I suppose, the positives that this line can bring, it's a bit of a mixed blessing, really. It provides a person with an intense sort of, intensity, focus, laser-like focus, and they're very good at concentrating on one thing at a time. Disturb them, and you'll probably regret it, because they're just so focused, and they're very passionate, and they're very good at doing that one thing at a time. And they know this, so when they're disturbed, it sort of breaks the reverie, and this is why they are just very good at focusing on one thing at a time. What it really does mean is that a person their decisions are both logical and emotional. That the decisions are combined in that way. They're intertwined. They need to be certain before making a decision, not just 90% sure. They need to be 100% sure before they go about making their decision. They need to believe it. There needs to be certainty. They can't just think it. This can provide difficulties for people with a simian line, and most people have it on one hand, and most have it on the left hand if they have it at all. Where it can create difficulties in the left hand is, as I say, it's the domestic sphere. It's more internal. It's more what's closer to home. It can cause jealousy, distrust amongst others, and so people with this can often fall into the trap of surrounding themselves with weak people, yes men, and I don't feel that's the case for this person, because actually what we see here, I think the reasons why this line actually formed, because I don't think this person was born with this, is because of what happened when they were young. We all know what happened to his mother, and I've done a reading on Princess Diana. I've done a reading on Prince William as well. Check those out. I'll put the links in. I actually think that this fusing of this mental and emotional responses came about because of this incident. And actually, if you look closely, first of all, the lifeline and the headline are fused together for a very long time. And this is always someone who's cautious. As I've said, this is someone who needs to be certain. But also it shows a sort of shyness, a lack of confidence. And this person really, had it not been for this need to get his message across to the wider world, this ability to speak his thoughts, his truth, his message, and had this thumb not been so strong, I think this really would be someone who just would be completely shut off to the world, who would be a complete, not recluse, but very shy, very, lacking in confidence. And I do think there are some confidence issues here, but I think they're balanced out by these, other aspects of this person's character. So that's quite fortunate. But we also see, quite a strong tying of the headline and lifeline on the right hand as well, left hand as well, sorry. And as I say, if you look closely on the left hand here, you can see the island right here. And this is, well, right here where the headline begins to break away, come out, where this person sort of comes into their own and begins to form their own, carve their own independence, their own unique sort of characteristics, is due to this awful incident which occurred at the age of 12. This is the age of 12 right here. So it sort of seems as though their psychological makeup almost is born out of this. Their unique perspective on life is born out of this one incident. And they say all roads lead to Rome. And for this person, this Rome for them is this incident here. So here, of course, is the headline. Here, of course, is the lifeline, and the heartline joins, I would think, actually, the headline forks and rises up towards outer Mars, and it's joined with the heartline. That's what I think is happening here. That's the heartline here. So it's all joined. All the three major lines are connected right here. And here, it's the age of 12. They're all connected at that age of 12. And Beryl Hutchinson, and I've demonstrated this in another one of my videos I did quite recently, Shock in Palmistry. Beryl Hutchinson, the legendary and totally understated palmist, said that when all three major palmar lines, the head, the life and the heartline, join, it's indicative of shock. It's delayed trauma of some sort. And this person, this is the left hand, it's what's internal. This person still has a lot of unpacking to do. Understandably, they lost their mother when they were young. This has really affected this person. As I say, being someone who is this is someone who's very actually sensitive, a feeler, takes a long time to process and analyze. This is exacerbated this awful event in their life, and it's meant that they will likely be dealing with this trauma for their entire lives. And that's really what is shown by the hands, in this left hand. That's why it's just so very different to the right hand. And this headline being actually as straight as it is, it almost rises upwards to level out. And this, someone actually mentioned it to me recently in the comments, that, and because I've mentioned this a few times, in ancient Rome, emperors would look for headlines similar to this, because the straighter they are, the more you can place on top of it. And they would look for this feature in people's palms when selecting commanders and generals, and this was seen as one of the ideal traits in military strategists. So they would look for this in up and coming people, to rise up in the ranks. And funnily enough, obviously we know Harry has military experience. And someone asked me, would a simian line also come into that? Well, the answer, it depends. There's lots of things to take into account. As I've already mentioned in this video, there's some things that might bring a person's character down, but then there's other things that might compensate for that, negate those negatives, as we've seen in his hand. So it really is the ideal sign of Harry would likely make an ideal military strategist, not just because he was a strong communicator. And I do think this is someone who could communicate very quickly in the moment. Yes, this is someone who takes a long time to process and analyze, but being, so able to break down information, being so silver-tongued, being so quick with his verbal responses, I do think that actually this is someone who is able to make decisions in the moment. The length of the headline as well shows someone who is a lateral thinker, a planner, and this is why it was looked for in ancient Rome. for the strength of being a military strategist. Also, it's a sign that the longer the headline, the further reaching a person's mental kind of influences on the rest of the world, the more lives they affect with their academic, with their mental energies, if you like. And I think also what this represents here, the way you've got this forking of the headline, actually this is, of all the simian lines, the best type of simian line to have in terms of negating the negatives of what the simian line means. So as I have said, people with this can succumb to feelings of jealousy, mistrust in others, but the fact that it sort of straightens out, it reaches down towards creativity, but as it kind of forks upwards and levels out, what we're actually seeing is someone who's thinking ahead, who's planning, thinking about the future. It shows a shaping of practicality. It shows this person is working through the issues that obviously early life tragedy has created. And so this is a real testament to their character and their ability to adapt. And actually the rounded, the roundedness to the fingers and the pointedness shows a great ability to adapt and to be flexible. Now, curiously, on the right hand, we see the heart line kind of reaching upwards even before the Saturn mount. It sort of looks more like the Apollo mount. And this is actually quite unique. And what this would represent, I think this is not a good sign. On the right hand, it shows that I think he probably provides this kind of hard exterior, cold, selfish exterior to others. However, the picture on the left hand is very different. And what we're seeing is someone who is actually a very considerate individual, someone who is thinking of others. The fingers also suggest this, because Saturn, it leans very sort of sharply towards Apollo at the tip, and it's showing actually this person is very conscious about the wrongdoings they have done. It shows a clear sense of conscience, right and wrong. And also, I stopped there for a second because I'm thinking, because also Jupiter is leaning towards Saturn as well. Saturn is the sense of right and wrong. It's planning, it's the inevitable. It's being an upstanding citizen. And so the fact that it's sort of leaning towards his environment shows that this idea of who he is turning to his environment. It's looking towards the unconscious side, travel, escapism, and also Jupiter leaning in like this as well is a positive sign, I feel, because it's showing his decision making is relying on a sense of right and wrong, but also it's relying a Jupiter that kind of leans in slightly as well is often a sign that someone is relying on others to help them make decisions. And so what I said before about surrounding himself with yes men, and I don't think that's what he's doing. This is partly the reason why, because actually I think he's relying on his wife for decision making, and I think that he trusts her, and I think that she's obviously very intelligent, and it's just a no-brainer for me. He wouldn't be with someone who isn't intelligent and who he cannot trust. So I feel that all these things combined, I do think that actually he plays a bit of a role in front of others. I think he purposefully perhaps presents himself as someone who is quite unforgiving and potentially sort of shallow. I think but actually on the inside, actually who he really is, and the left hand really reveals that, is actually he's not this person at all. And the way that Mercury is so bent at the tip, it does show an ability there to deceive, to trick. This is a very clever and cunning individual, but I don't think that he would do this to cause harm in any way. because of what I clearly see here is a strong sense of right and wrong. Now, you may have noticed this deep sort of gouge right here underneath, well, on the mount of Venus itself. We can see some sort of deep kind of aggression here from inner Mars, some very sort of motivating factor towards, connected to this. Well, I've mentioned this line quite a few times, and it's known as the loyalty line to some people, but it's also referred to as the via mater, as in the mother line, and it does show a strong attachment to the mother. Now, the fact that we've got this drive, this anger, aggression, this motivation attached to this, or pointing towards it at the very least, it shows the feeling of anger around the loss of this person's mother. At least that's what I'm picking up on. So as promised, I would get to the bottom of the wearing of this ring here. Obviously, the left hand Apollo ring is, it's the wedding ring, and it's the most commonly worn. It's obviously the most common finger to find a ring on because of the common tradition of getting married, right? But on the right hand, the Apollo, the wearing of a ring on an Apollo finger on the right hand, as I've mentioned earlier on, I feel like there's a leveling out, a working through, an understanding of the events now in this person's life. I think they're working through these things. I think they're making, they've made great strides through working through this awful incident. And as a result, they are now much more in alignment with themselves. They're much more at peace. There's more balance here. This person is essentially now more able to find out who they are. Now, the wearing of the ring on this finger does in fact represent this. It represents this emotional stability. It can also represent the sort of, there's a feeling, an unconscious feeling of a stunting of artistic abilities, but I think in this case, Harry's not particularly an artistic person. As I said, he's very practical when it comes to creative matters, and he's very creative when it comes to practical matters. So I think what this ring means, I think it's much more around emotional stability at this time. Sometimes it can represent feelings of issues within a person's marriage, but I think you have to look at all of the circumstantial clues, and if we look down here, we can see the marriage line facing towards, it is pointing towards the life, the head and the heart line, the simian line there. So perhaps there is some difficulties within their marriage at this time, that this was taken, maybe not, but I do think this is, it's showing there's an unconscious feeling around how they now feel much more aligned and at peace with themselves. So that is this week's Sunday case study. Let me know what your thoughts are. Perhaps you've seen something else in this person's hand. Perhaps you've read something else about another palm reading based on this person. Let me know what your thoughts are, and thank you for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.